Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Fresh Fiction Video Book Club. I'm Samantha T., and today's guest is the legendary Rhys Bowen. She's here to talk about her latest book, The ROSE ARBOR. But this author, Rhys, you have over 10 million copies of books that you have sold in multiple languages, multiple series. How do you keep all of these things straight? My gosh.
As well as writing the standalones, I write 2 series. And people often say, do you mix up the series at all? But I never do. When I'm writing one book, I'm completely in that world. I'm with Lady Georgie in 1930s England, and I'm being very proper. Or I'm with Molly Murphy in New York, and life is very gritty. And when I'm with my standalones, I could be anywhere. I could be in Venice. I could be in Tuscany. In this case, I could be in England in a little abandoned village. I'm very focused. And during that first draft, I find it really hard to turn off. I still do 2.5 books a year, which is crazy, isn't it? I will wake up in the night and think, oh, she would never have said that. Then I have to get up and scribble it. When the moment the first draft is finished, I can go phew, and I can breathe a bit. But I get so involved. I have to tell you, there have been times when I've come up and I've snapped at John upstairs and he looks like, what did I do? And I say, oh, sorry, it's Molly who's annoyed with Daniel. It's not. I get very involved with my books when I'm in that early stage.
How did you first get started writing?
My mother tells me I wrote my first poem when I was 4. So I guess I've been a writer all my life, really. Lived in a pretending world. I still do. How many people can spend their childhood pretending to be someone else and they can still do it when they grow up and all their life? That's a lot of fun, isn't it? I think my first serious writing was when I was in my teens. I really wanted to be a movie star. So I remember thinking, oh, I'll need some scripts. The moment I'm discovered, I'd want to have some scripts ready for me. So I wrote some movie scripts, in which, of course, I was the heroine. And they were all terribly tragic and terribly sad and ended up with everybody's... And the way teenagers do. And so that was the first really serious writing I did. But then right after I thought I was going to be a journalist, and it wasn't. And I edited the college newspaper, did all that sort of thing. And then on television once, I saw someone whose husband had murdered their 3 children and killed himself. And I saw the people interviewing, and I thought, I could never do that. I could never say, how did you feel when you found your children? I couldn't do that. So I decided I didn't want to be a journalist. So I went instead into the BBC, and I wound up in BBC drama, doing fabulous plays. And I'd be working on one of these plays and I'd think, oh, if I'd written that play, I would not have ended it that way. So I went home and I wrote a play. And with the bravado of a 22-year-old, I walked into the office of the head of drama at the BBC and said, I've written this play. And a few days later, he called me in and he said, we really like this, we're going to do it. So that I've been a published professional author ever since then. So, yeah, moved on from, I got lured down to Australia, Australian television, met my husband in Australia. He was on his way to California. That's how I wound up here.
Do you think it was just the bravado of youth to go in and say, I've written this play and I think that you should do it? Or was that some other level of self-confidence? And have you found yourself taking the same steps other times during your career?
Oh, I think when you don't know, you're much bolder. If I'd thought now, if someone said, would you please go to the head of drama? It's funny now because one of my Royal Spinous series has just been optioned by this fabulous TV company. And I've been doing Zoom meetings with people who are really what I consider to be icons in TV. And there I am chatting on this thing. And I'm thinking, this woman did Bridget Jones's Diary. How cool is that? And I have to be very cool and chatting back. But so I think when you're young, you have no fear. And the fact that it never occurred to me to be scared. But now I would think I can't go to the head of BBC drama. So I think once you learn, you become much more careful in what you do.
I have to say, because I love the Royal Spinous series, and with Lady Georgie. What was the inspiration behind that series? And what do you think is so unique about that, where you've been able to take it now to this next level where you're having these types of meetings? You have so many books in this series and there's always something new with it.
Yeah, it started, strangely enough, it started because my publisher at the time kept saying to me, we can't really break you out unless you write us a big, dark, standalone novel. So I kept thinking, child molesters, terrorists poisoning the water supply, serial killers. And then I'd turn on TV and there'd be so much darkness. And I thought, I don't want to spend 6 months in that sort of world. So then I thought, what would be the most unlikely sleuth I could ever think of? How about if she was royal? But she was penniless because, let's say it was the 1930s, the Great Depression, nobody had any work. And then how would she survive? Because she wasn't qualified for anything. She knew how to walk around with a book on her head, and she knew where to seat a bishop at a dinner table. These are not marketable skills. So I sat down and I started to write in her voice. And I wrote about 10 pages. And I have to say, those 10 pages are pretty much unchanged in the first chapter of the first book. So I just got the voice right there, and there it was. And I started writing. I showed it to my agent, who said, oh, I love this. And we showed it to the publisher, who went, no, that wasn't what we wanted at all. So my agent put it out to bids elsewhere, and it went to another house where I've lived happily ever after. And I think I get a lot of fan mail, and nobody ever says, I love that clever plot twist that you did. People say, I love Georgie. I love Darcy. I love Grandad. I hate Fig. I love Queenie. I hate that they feel very passionately about all these characters. It's every time they read, it's like going back to a family reunion. And if I leave one of those characters out, I get these letters like, you didn't have Belinda in this book. You didn't have Queen. So I have to remember to try and bring as many as I can into each story. And they're really passionate about what's going to happen next. So I think it's character. It's completely character driven. That's why I think it will be really nice on TV, because we'll be able to follow those characters through each of the stories. And I think if you read all 80, it's going to be the 18th book comes out in November. It was due to come out, I have to tell you, on November the 6th. And I looked at the calendar and I called my publisher. I said, are you crazy? This is election day. Nobody in the world will want to look at a book. So we put it back, and it's November the 19th now it comes out. But that's book number 18 in the series. And we've seen a lot of character development. We've seen Georgie being completely alone, naive. We've seen her meeting someone. I'm not going to tell you if you haven't read the series, but we've seen that whole romance, will it be, won't it be? And it's gone through to 18 books now. So there's a lot of Georgie to be followed.
And how do you keep your inspiration going for that series? Or really for either of the series, for that one and also your Molly Murphy?
I can say first for Molly Murphy too, I now write that series with my daughter, and she loves research. And so there's so many stories to be told about New York in the early 1900s. She's been reading the New York Times for every day we write about them. Let me turn that off. Sorry. Yeah, that's a husband who's been rather silly. I told him I was in the middle of a Zoom. Goodbye. Yeah. I said to him, I have a Zoom at 5. What does he not understand about the word Zoom at 5:30? Anyway, I'm sorry.
Obviously, then the time to call. And yes.
Yeah. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, Molly.
Writing with your daughter.
Yes.
She checked the New York Times.
Yes. So she reads the New York Times. She gets a little bit too obsessive sometimes. She'll say to me, oh, you have to make Molly carry an umbrella that day because it's going to rain. And I say, it's fiction. We can make it not rain. But she's found all these interesting stories that I would never have known about. Really, we could go on with that series forever, because New York is this great melting pot, and so many discoveries. Wilbur Wright has just flown up the Hudson River. All these sort of things are really fascinating to write about. And Royal Spyness, I find it a joy to write, because I just love being with those characters. I love doing all of the, I suppose it's gentle satire about the British class system. and how very silly the whole thing is, and how the aristocrats take themselves so seriously. And of course, I have lots of inspiration because my husband's family is just like that. Especially when we were first married, there were all these older people who, of course, were around in the 30s. And they really did say things like, "Oh, do you remember that joke we played on the butler?" And I would get my little notebook out and write it all down. And so those stories are just, I think also with that series, it's funny and it's light, and Georgie's funny things and serious things happen to us. But underneath it, there's this undercurrent of real history. And we've seen at the beginning of the series that in Germany, there was this funny little man with a mustache, and nobody believed he could last 2 seconds. And now we're coming into 1937, and we see the danger. So underneath, we've seen this development going through Europe of Mussolini taking power, of Hitler taking power, of the Spanish Civil War. And we realized these things are not going to end well. We're leading up to World War II. And then, of course, I have the problem in the future. Do I handle World War II? Because you can't be funny about a war. Suddenly life is very serious and very horrible for everybody. So will I stop the series before we get into the war? I'm not sure. We'll have to. I'm going very slowly. I'm moving ahead 3 months at a time. We'll see how that goes.
And I think that's one of the interesting things, too, thought about with your different books, because with the Royal Spinus set in the 30s, it is a time of great transformation that's happening in the world, and what's coming, like you were just saying. Same thing at the turn of the century. You're on the cusp of all of these fantastical changes in society that are coming. And then even with your standalones, most of those are set also in the late 30s, early 40s, World War II. I mean, do you find yourself just drawn to those time periods because of the nature of change, or that there's just such a rich amount of history that you can pull on from different perspectives? What do you think that is that you keep going to these different time periods?
Definitely a lot of my standalones, as you can see from the shelf behind me, the Paris Assignment, the Venice Sketchbook, the Tuscan Child, are all set in World War II. And I think I was so compelled to write about this time period because two things. Most of the people who were there, almost at the end of their lives, were losing the people who can give us a first-hand account. And then I felt it was the last time we had a clear sense of good versus evil. All of the wars we've had since then have been shades of gray. Are we doing the right thing? But everybody in World War II knew, if I don't do my part, evil will swallow the world. And I think they all felt this really strongly. I know my father, he was in a protected occupation, and he went to sign up and they said, "No, you're in a protected occupation." So he said, "What do you need?" And they said, "Drivers." And he said, "I'm a driver." So that was what people did in those days. They felt they had to join up because it was their duty. I wanted to show this, but also after the war, lots of books came out about, I was terribly brave and I flew this plane. I was terribly brave and I was in a submarine. Nobody said women were very brave. People thought, oh, yes, they were very brave because they had to send their sons off to war and they stayed in their houses and made jars of jam. But then the more you look into it, there was real bravery, not just the putting on a brave face for your children, but there are things that I've written about now with people taking enormous risks, working at Bletchley Park and saving a convoy. Or in the Paris Assignment, my heroine is sent into enemy-occupied France, and she knows during their training, the training's really brutal, she knows that their chances of survival are 25%. And yet she still does it, and she knows what will happen if she's captured. The worst things imaginable are waiting for her. And yet these young women who were not anything special, they were just young women, they did it. And so I'm really glad that I've been able to write about them. And of course, in this new book, The Rose Arbor, I've moved ahead, but the story in many ways is tied back to World War II again. And that was another thing that really struck me. There's two things in the book about World War II. One, of course, is it takes place, this Rose Arbor is in an abandoned village. And if you think about it, the army came one day to this small village. This is a true village. Only I've changed its name. Came to a small village on the south coast and says you had 3 weeks to get out. And they had to pack up their belongings, and trucks came and took their belongings. And these are houses that they'd lived in and their forefathers had lived in for generations. And they left this pathetic note on the church door. They wrote, "This is our home. Would you please take good care of it so we can come back after the war?" And what they didn't know was that the army was planning to practice invasion tactics on this village, and it was blown to pieces. That place, when I read about it, I just had to write about it because it's such a haunting place. So that was one place. And the other thing that ties this to World War II is the crime in 1968 seems to be linked to 3 little girls who vanished during World War II. And they were put on a train to be evacuated and never seen again. And you think to yourself, as a mother, to take your child to a station, some of these kids were 5 years old, to take them to a station with a label around their neck and a little suitcase and put them on a train. And then off they went. And these trains stopped in small stations in the countryside and they offloaded some kids. And someone would say, "Oh, I'll have this child and I'll take these 2. And if there was good record keeping, you made a note of that. If there wasn't, who knows where they went? And each child had a postcard with them they were supposed to send home when they got, "Dear Mummy, I am staying with Farmer Brown." But when you think of all the possibilities of things that could go wrong there, I don't know if I'd ever have done it if I had kids at that age. That's the other link to World War II. And of course, there's the heroine's own link to World War II, which we probably can't say too much about.
Nope, no spoilers. Nope.
Yeah.
Do you find, I think it's so interesting also because you are writing the Molly Murphy series with your daughter, and I'm sure that has a lot of different ups and downs and some unique features being your daughter as opposed to just another writer. Do you find that you're also talking with her more on your other books that you don't actively write with her? Or are you guys able to keep those things separate?
I knew before, she came to me about 3 or 4 years. We're on our 5th book now. She came to me about 3 or 4 years ago. And I had put the Molly Murphy series on hiatus because I simply couldn't do 3 books a year. And I got all these emails saying, "When's the next Molly book going to come out?" So my daughter said, "I think I'd like to do this series with you." And I was a little bit ambivalent because she is my daughter and I love her. And I thought, what if this doesn't work? And I have to say, "No, sorry, I can't." But anyway, I said, let's give it a try. And she was brilliant. She came in with great ideas. She came in with Molly's voice. And of course, it gives us the excuse to chat every day. And of course, my husband will say, "Who's on the phone?" And I'd say, "It's Claire. You spoke to her yesterday." I say, "Yes, and I'm speaking to her today. And we're discussing the next chapter, whether we are or not." But I think I run things past her on my books before this. "Would you read this and tell me if this is a bit too slow?" And she's always given me good input, and I definitely do bounce ideas off her. It works very well.
Rhys, I want to switch over to what we call our Fresh Fiction Facts. These
Yes.
are a series of rapid fire questions off the top of your head.
Okay. Yes.
With so many different books, how do you celebrate a new release?
It's interesting because I think I'm up to, I was trying to work it out. Book 58, 57 or 58 now. So that's quite a lot. But it's still very exciting. That first time you walk into the bookstore and you see it, that's really cool. And of course, it's even cooler when you look on Kindle and you see your number 45 on Kindle and your number 1 on historical mystery and thriller and your number 1 on cozy mystery. And so that's very cool. Always. We always go out to dinner the night a book comes out. Husbands don't quite take this in. And he comes and he goes, "So what's for dinner tonight?" And I say, "Do you remember what day it is?" And he goes, "It's Tuesday." And I go, "And what's special Tuesday?" And he goes, oh, you have a new book out and you want to go out to dinner? Yes. But no, we always go out to dinner and celebrate. And if I spend my winters in Arizona, and I live very close to this daughter, Claire, the one who writes with me. If I'm in Arizona, I usually do a launch event at the Poison Pen bookstore, which is a wonderful bookstore there. And then Claire and I will go out to dinner afterwards. And we usually take Barbara Peters, who's the store owner, take her with us. So we have, but here in California, I sometimes do an event at Book Passage, but this time I just did lots and lots of Zoom events. It's interesting that since COVID, it's become wonderful to do these events because I do the event for the bookstore. And instead of having a crowd of 100, which is lovely, have a crowd of 2,000, which is really nice. And someone will say, I'm joining you from Stockholm. I'm joining you from Australia. And you can do that with Zoom. So we've found a whole new way to link our readers across the world.
I know we've really enjoyed it with Fresh Fiction because around COVID is when we started our video book club. And so being able to talk to authors like you, and like you said, we have other readers calling in from around the country, internationally. It's been great fun to be able to almost have that personal touch and be able to connect this way. Okay, but back to the Fresh Fiction facts. Who was your first book boyfriend or girlfriend?
Oh, gosh. I think probably the first book I really got involved in as a teenager was The Lord of the Rings. So it was probably Aragorn. Yeah. Before that, I read...
See, that's much bigger than mine.
Yeah, before that,
Lord of the Rings much better.
Yeah, so before that, I used to read the sort of spy kids who had spy adventures and things, but none of them really grabbed me that way. And of course, it was The Lord of the Rings. When I read it, I was right at the age to be impressed, to weep and to do everything else. And so that book has stayed with me all my life. I've read it so many times. I can probably do it. I can recite it by heart, probably.
Do you think that's your most dog-eared book, the one that you just keep going back to over and over, or is there another one that you probably reread even more?
No, that's definitely the one I've read the most. It's not dog-eared because for one of my birthdays, my aunt gave me the lovely proper edition in a little box. So I keep that very nicely. Another book that I read, I've had for years, and it is falling to pieces now. There was a book called Our Hearts Are Young and Gay, which was about two young women who go around Europe in the 1920s. And it was just so funny and so ridiculous that it's one of those books, if you're very depressed, I grab that and read it again because the things they did, an example was they're sailing away from Canada. They have to catch a boat from Montreal. And as someone jumps overboard, and it turns out that he's a Polish immigrant who's being deported. He jumps overboard, so Emily, one of the young women, thinks she's doing a noble thing, and she throws a deck chair onto him to try and save him. She knocks him out, and then he has to be rescued. Things like that happen throughout the whole book, so it's really a silly book that you can laugh at.
What luxury item or unnecessary product can you not live without?
Oh, gosh. Are books necessary products?
Oh, books are definitely necessary products. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have my special pillow. I can't live without my special pillow because it's just the right, when you travel and everything, hotel pillows are horrible. But I don't think I have many luxury items. I'm not the sort of person who goes in for perfumes and things like that. And my daughters despair of me with my clothes because I'm the sort of person like, I say, oh, I like that pair of white pants. And my daughter says, buy it. And I go, but I already have a pair of white pants. My daughter said, but Mom, you can afford more than one pair of white pants. But I was raised in those years after World War II in England, where everything was you saved and you didn't waste money and everything. And that's really ingrained in me. But I'll have to think about I can't think of a real luxury item that other people would think. I do have my Celtic harp. Is that a luxury item?
Oh, now see, that's what I am jealous over. I read that in one of the facts about you that you have a Celtic harp.
Yeah.
That is one of those instruments I so want to learn how to play. That and the bagpipe. Those are my two instruments. And I'm like, I can do those.
Do you play the guitar and the piano?
I play the violin. I did the piano and the violin were my two main instruments, and then other scatterings of things.
Yeah. See, I think I also play the guitar. And so the harp was fairly easy for me to learn because the fact that your hands are going to go onto 3 strings to make a chord is not that different from what you're doing on the guitar. And obviously it's a 3.5 octave Celtic harp. It's not one of those great big things. So it's not intimidating. So pretty much I could sit down and play simple tunes to start with. I've never practiced enough that I can really do a lot of these Irish, but I play enough to amuse myself, I think. It sits in my,
regularly get it out, right?
It sits in my office, and when I don't want to write anymore or I'm stuck, I swivel around my chair and I go, oh, I think I'll bring my harp out for a few minutes. Yes. Yeah, I do. It's a nice comfort thing. Oh, and I do have my stuffed toys. Are they luxury items? I've got on my bed, I've got Snoopy and Paddington Bear have to sit on my bed.
Okay. One for America's, one for England, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you've been kidnapped, but 2 hours later, you're returned because you will not stop talking about what?
I was probably my grandchildren. I do tend to talk about my grandchildren. I'm very proud of them, and they're all doing fantastic things. So yes, I would bore the person to death with my grandchildren.
And how many grandchildren do you have then?
I have 5, and they're all around college. They're all mostly in college, nearly all in college. Yes.
Normally, I ask this about people's kids, but have your grandkids read your books?
Yeah, they've probably read some of them. They're all studying. And actually, when you're in college, a couple of them one's in dental school, one's doing a master's in engineering. You don't have much time for reading. And I think, and anyways, the boys, it's my experience that boys don't read in the same way that girls read. My eldest grandson reads a lot of science fiction, fantasy, but I don't think any of them read murder mysteries. I'll get them hooked one day.
Definitely, yes. And for me, because I'm also was engineering in school, reading was my escape. I needed the break from all of the technical stuff. So I loved any type of fiction book where I could get my hands on. So there's still hope. Don't worry. Let's see. What, especially since you've been having these discussions about the Royal Spinus, what book have you read that you've enjoyed so much where it was made into a movie or TV adaptation? Where did they do a good job with?
It's interesting. You've just talked about this Bridget Jones's Diary. I think they did a fabulous job with the book, and it was a really funny book. And I just loved the movie too. Of course, the other one, which is one of my favorite things ever, is the TV adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, which is why I called my hero Darcy in the Royal Spinus series. When I met my editor right after she'd bought the series, and she said to me, was there any particular reason you called him Darcy? And I said, every time I write about him, I see Colin Firth coming out of that lake.
That is very good inspiration, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Unfortunately, he's too old now to play Darcy in my TV series, but I hope there's some. I was saying when we were talking on the Zoom about plans for the TV series, I said, I'll need to fly across and do the auditioning of Darcy myself. You do realize that, don't you?
I think that's a really good writer to put in the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who do you think deserves to be on your Mount Rushmore of writing? 4 authors that could either be your favorites or the most inspirational.
Do they have to be alive? Oh, Okay, if they have to be anybody, Jane Austen, Tolkien, Agatha Christie, obviously. And let me think. There's so many writers that I have really admired and read, and it should be someone who's fairly current, I think. Of the mystery writers who are around at the moment, it's interesting. Two of my best friends are Louise Penny and Jacqueline Winspear, and I think both of them are terrific writers. I think my favorite, if I had to say my favorite mystery author, would be Reginald Hill. He's passed away now, but I really loved his books and I thought they were so good. So perhaps I'll put him on Mount, because I don't think he got as much credit as he deserved. I thought they did make a TV series of D.L. and Pascoe, but some of his books were just outstanding.
Rhys, most important question
Yes.
is, what is the best way for our readers and listeners to keep up with you and find out what's going on?
Oh, there's a very easy way. I am on Facebook as Rhys Bowen author, but then I have 73,000 followers, and quite a lot of those are very strange African and Asian gentlemen. In order to escape very strange comments like, "Hello, beautiful mama, I want to come and live at your house," I have now got a private Facebook group, and it's called Tea with Rhys, and there is no spam, and we all love each other, and we talk about tea and Britain and what I'm writing, and we all have a lovely time. So anybody who'd like to come and join Tea with Rhys, you'd be most welcome, and I'd love to see you.
Readers, listeners, you heard it here. That's where you need to go. Tea with Rhys. You can hear about the ROSE ARBOR and, of course, find out about the other upcoming releases, because we have more to look forward to later this year. But first, thank you again for joining us today, Rhys, but stick around for the happy hour with our other readers.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for a very nice chat. Thank you very much.